When I got the letter, I thought it was another sympathy card. My father had passed away only 2 months earlier, and the house still smelled like his aftershave. But the envelope had an official stamp, City Property Office. I opened it at the kitchen table, the paper trembling in my hand. Notice of ownership transfer for 42 Maple Ridge Lane, it said. My heart stopped. That was our family property. The one Dad had built himself. The document said it had been sold. Sold. And the signature at the bottom wasn't mine. It was my uncle's. I grabbed my phone and called him right away. Uncle Roy, what's this? He sighed. Mara, you don't understand. The property was under the estate's control. We needed the money for taxes. It's done. Done. I shouted. Without telling me? He hung up. Just like that. I drove to his office that afternoon, but his assistant told me he was unavailable. That night, I sat alone staring at the paper. It couldn't be legal. It couldn't be right. My father's will had said the property would pass to me. Something was wrong, and I was going to find out what. The next morning, I went to the county records office. The clerk looked up the file on her computer and frowned. According to our system, the sale went through 2 weeks ago, she said. Buyer's name is Thomas Keene. Can I see the documents? I asked. She shook her head. Only the estate executor can request full copies. That's my uncle, I said bitterly. I walked outside feeling like the ground had shifted under me. My father had trusted Uncle Roy with everything after Mom died. He'd said, he's family. He'll protect what's ours. Now it seemed he'd done the opposite. I called our old family lawyer, Mr. Dean. He agreed to meet me that evening. His office smelled of paper and dust. He looked older than I remembered, his gray hair thin and tired. Mara, he said gently, your father's will was never officially filed. Roy said you both agreed to let him manage things quietly. That's a lie, I said. I never agreed to anything. Mr. Dean frowned. Then we may have a case, but we'll need proof. Start with the sale documents. And be careful who you trust. The next day, I drove to 42 Maple Ridge Lane. My father's workshop still stood by the oak tree. A sold sign leaned against the gate. A moving truck was parked by the porch, and a tall man in a suit was directing workers. I stepped out of my car. Are you Thomas Keene? He turned, surprised. Yes. Can I help you? I'm Mara Ellis. This was my father's property. I just found out it was sold. His face softened. I'm sorry. I didn't know the family still lived here. Your uncle handled the sale. He didn't tell me anything, I said quietly. Thomas hesitated. I'm a developer. I buy old properties to restore them. But something about this deal felt rushed. Your uncle wanted it closed in 2 days. No inspection, cash payment. That made me pause. No inspection? He nodded. Strange, right? I can show you the contract if you want. I agreed and we walked inside. Seeing my father's furniture half covered with sheets hurt more than I expected. Thomas handed me a copy of the sale file. My uncle's signature was there, but so was another, forged under my name. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the fake signature. It looked close to mine, but the loop in the M was wrong. My uncle must have forged it. At sunrise, I drove to Mr. Dean's office with the papers. This is fraud, I said, laying them on his desk. He studied them carefully. Yes. But to challenge it, we'll need to prove your father's will existed and that you were the rightful heir. I have copies of his notes at home, I said. He drafted them before the accident. Mr. Dean leaned forward. Find them. Every page matters. When I returned home, I opened my father's old desk. There were folders full of blueprints, letters, and receipts, but no will. The drawer where he kept personal files was empty. Someone had taken it. I sat on the floor, holding a photo of Dad and me at the property site. He used to say, if anything ever happens to me, protect this place, Mara. It's our legacy. I whispered, I will, Dad. I promise. Then I noticed a small metal key taped to the back of the picture frame. The key was tiny and old, with the letters MR scratched into it, short for Maple Ridge. My heart raced. Dad must have hidden something there. I drove back to the property that afternoon. The workers were gone, but Thomas was still there, checking blueprints on his truck hood. "You again," he said, smiling slightly. "Find something new?" "Maybe." I held up the key. "Do you mind if I look around?" He hesitated, then nodded. "As long as you're careful." Inside the workshop, dust floated in the sunlight. My father's tools were neatly arranged, untouched. I searched every drawer until I noticed a small metal box built into the floor under his workbench. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a sealed envelope. My father's handwriting covered the front. "For Mara, if anything happens to me." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a copy of his original will, notarized and dated 2 weeks before his death. It clearly stated the property belonged entirely to me. I looked up at Thomas. "I think this changes everything." Mr. Dean's eyes widened when I placed the will on his desk. "Mara, this is powerful," he said. "It's dated, notarized, and signed properly. This could overturn the sale." I felt a rush of hope. "So, what do we do?" "We'll file a petition to freeze any construction or development until the matter is reviewed. But we need to act fast before your uncle moves the money." He made a few calls while I waited. I could hear his firm voice through the door, calm but urgent. When he returned, he said, "The court hearing is set for Friday. Do you think we can win?" He nodded slowly. "If that document is real, and it looks real, you have every right to reclaim your father's property." As I left his office, I noticed a dark car parked across the street. The driver lowered his window slightly, then rolled it up again. I quickened my pace. That evening, I got an anonymous text. "Stop digging into the sale. It's already done." I stared at the screen, my stomach turning cold. Whoever sent it knew exactly what I was doing, but it only made me more determined. The next morning, I met Thomas at a cafe downtown. He looked concerned. "You're getting threats now?" I nodded. "Someone doesn't want me near the truth." He leaned forward. I checked the sale logs again. "There's something strange. Your uncle didn't transfer the money to a family account. It went to a private company called R&L Developments. Is that his business?" I asked. "Not officially," he said, "but I traced it. He's listed as a silent partner." My chest tightened. He used my father's property to fund himself. Thomas hesitated. "There's more. I found a missing clause in the contract. Someone removed the paragraph about disclosure of ownership. That's fraud." I felt dizzy. "Can we use that in court?" "Yes, but I'd have to testify," he said. "Are you okay with that?" I nodded firmly. "You've already done more than enough." Thomas smiled faintly. "Your father built something worth protecting. I get it." When I walked outside, I saw the same dark car parked by the corner. This time, it drove away as soon as I looked at it. On Thursday, the day before the hearing, I went to my uncle's office. His secretary's eyes widened when she saw me. "He's busy," she said quickly. "He'll see me," I replied. Roy looked startled when I entered. He stood up from behind his polished desk. "Mara, what's the meaning of this?" I held out the will. "You forged my signature and sold Dad's property." He laughed, but his voice cracked. "You have no proof of that." "I have this," I said, laying the document down. "And a copy of the contract showing your shell company." His face turned pale. "You don't know what you're dealing with." "I know you betrayed Dad," I said, "and you're going to answer for it." As I turned to leave, he said coldly, "You'll regret this. That property is bigger than you realize." I didn't understand what he meant then, but the words stayed with me. Outside, the same black car waited by the curb. This time, the driver stepped out, a tall man in a gray coat. He didn't speak. He just watched me until I drove away. Friday morning arrived gray and rainy. Mr. Dean met me outside the courthouse, files tucked under his arm. "Stay calm," he said. "We have facts, not fear." Inside, my uncle sat at the defendant's table with 2 lawyers. He looked confident again. The judge entered, and the courtroom went silent. Mr. Dean began by presenting the notarized will and the sale records. My uncle's lawyer objected, claiming the will was invalid because it had been hidden. Mr. Dean replied, "Hidden for protection, Your Honor, not deception." Then Thomas took the stand. He explained the rushed sale, the missing inspection, and the altered contract. His testimony was calm and detailed. When my uncle was called up, he stammered. "It was all for the family," he said weakly. "Mara couldn't manage the estate." The judge raised an eyebrow. "So you forged her signature?" He froze. At that moment, Mr. Dean handed me a note from our assistant outside the room. "The company account has unusual activity. Someone's moving funds right now." My heart pounded. "Your Honor," I said, standing up, "I have new information that can't wait." The judge nodded. "Go on, Ms. Ellis." I handed over a printed bank report. An anonymous source just confirmed that funds from R&L Developments are being transferred overseas this minute. My uncle's trying to hide the profits from the sale. The judge glanced at the papers, then looked sharply at my uncle. "Mr. Ellis, is this true?" Roy shifted uncomfortably. I'm not aware of that." "Freeze all accounts linked to this transaction immediately," the judge ordered the clerk. Roy's lawyer whispered urgently to him, but I saw panic flash in his eyes. Mr. Dean turned to me and whispered, "You just stopped him from escaping." When the hearing ended, the judge said he would review the will and the fraud claims in detail. Until then, he declared, the property sale is suspended. I let out a shaky breath. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small victory. Outside, Thomas was waiting. "You did it," he said. "Not yet," I replied. "Something tells me this goes deeper than my uncle." And I was right. The next day, the buyer uncovered something I never saw coming. The next morning, Thomas called me early. His voice sounded tense. "You need to come to the property. Now." When I arrived, his truck was parked near the old barn. He waved me over and pointed to the ground where workers had started clearing for renovation. We were digging near the back fence when we found this. It was a small, rusted metal box. The lock was broken, but the papers inside were dry, sealed in plastic. My father's handwriting filled the top page. I knelt down and read aloud. "If anything happens to me, this property must not be sold. It contains research notes and prototype materials not meant for public release." Thomas looked confused. "Research notes?" I nodded slowly. My father was working on a new kind of energy storage, something he said could change construction design forever. Inside the box were blueprints, chemical notes, and photos of lab tests. Thomas whistled. "If this is real, it's worth millions." That's when I understood why Roy had rushed to sell the land. It wasn't just about money, it was about ownership. Whoever controlled these plans would control my father's legacy. And now that secret was finally uncovered. We took the box straight to Mr. Dean. He flipped through the documents carefully, his glasses sliding down his nose. "These aren't just designs," he said. "They're patent drafts. Your father was weeks away from filing." I blinked. "Then the invention's still unregistered?" "Yes," Mr. Dean said, his eyes narrowing. "Which means anyone with the original blueprints could claim the idea as their own." My stomach turned. That's why Roy needed to sell the property, so he could bury these papers before anyone found them. Thomas looked thoughtful. Or to sell them quietly later. We decided to file a report with the court immediately. Mr. Dean warned, "Once we submit this, Roy will know we've found something huge." That evening, my front door was unlocked when I got home. I froze. Inside, drawers were open, papers scattered everywhere. My father's framed photo had fallen and cracked on the floor. Someone had been searching for the box. I called Mr. Dean. "They broke in," I said, shaking. He replied quietly, "Then we're closer to the truth than they want us to be." The next day, we met with a police detective named Officer Quinn. She listened as we explained everything: the forged sale, the hidden will, and the research box. Quinn took notes carefully. "If what you're saying checks out, this isn't just fraud. It's theft of intellectual property. I'll open an investigation." Thomas handed her the box. "You'll want to keep this safe." Quinn nodded. "We'll get it analyzed by experts. If these papers are genuine, they'll tie your uncle directly to the motive for selling the land." When we left the station, the sky was dark and heavy with clouds. Thomas turned to me. "You okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. "It's a lot to take in." My father trusted Roy. Thomas nodded. People hide greed well until money's involved. Later that night, I got another text. "You should have stayed quiet. This will ruin you too." My hands shook, but I didn't reply. Instead, I printed every document we had and stored copies in a safe place. If Roy thought he could scare me into silence, he was wrong. 2 days later, Officer Quinn called with updates. "The papers are real," she said. "Your father was developing a compact energy cell system, something far ahead of its time. The notes match his handwriting and patent records." My throat tightened. He really was close to finishing it. "Yes," Quinn said. "And your uncle contacted 2 corporate buyers last month. One of them wired an advance payment through that shell company." "Do you know which company?" She hesitated. "A foreign tech firm called Mavinex. They specialize in green energy." My chest felt heavy. So, he wasn't just stealing from me. He was selling my father's work overseas. Quinn replied, "We've frozen the transaction, but he'll fight back hard. Be prepared." That afternoon, Thomas stopped by. "We can't let him twist this," he said. "If the judge sees the research, it proves the sale was more than fraud, it was exploitation." I nodded. Let's make sure everyone knows what my father really built. For the first time, I didn't just want justice. I wanted truth. The next hearing was tense. Reporters filled the benches now that word of the hidden invention had spread. My uncle sat stiffly, pretending calm, but I saw his hands tremble. Officer Quinn testified first, confirming the break-in at my home and the discovery of the prototype plans. Then Thomas described finding the box buried behind the fence. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and said, "My father's dream was never about money. It was about helping people build safer, stronger homes. That's what he wanted to protect." Roy's lawyer tried to object, saying, "The will doesn't mention research materials." Mr. Dean stepped forward. "That's because Mr. Ellis stored them on the same property. By selling it under false pretenses, the defendant intended to claim ownership of the technology." The judge listened carefully. At the end, he said, "Given the evidence, this court will require an immediate review of all estate transactions and suspend Mr. Roy Ellis from acting as executor." Roy slammed his briefcase shut. His eyes burned with anger as he whispered, "You think you've won, Mara, but you have no idea what you started." After the hearing, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me jump. I kept thinking about my uncle's words. "You have no idea what you started." The next morning, Officer Quinn called. "Mara, we traced an offshore transfer linked to Mavinex. Your uncle received an advance months before your father's death." I froze. "Are you saying Dad's accident might not have been?" She interrupted gently. "We're not there yet, but it's suspicious." I felt cold all over. My father's car crash had been ruled accidental, faulty brakes. But what if it hadn't been? Thomas came over that evening with coffee. "We'll get to the bottom of it," he said firmly. "Your uncle's desperate now. That means he's slipping." We reviewed every document again. One letter caught my eye, an unsigned draft on Roy's stationery. It said, "Once the estate clears, Mavinex will receive full rights to Project Ember." Project Ember? I whispered. That was Dad's name for the prototype. Thomas looked at me seriously. "Then your uncle planned this long before your father passed." The truth was becoming clearer and darker by the minute. Officer Quinn arranged another meeting at the station. "We've located your uncle's contact at Mavinex," she said. "He's a consultant named Harold Crane. He's flying in tomorrow for questioning." I nodded slowly. "Does Roy know?" "Not yet. We're keeping it quiet." The next day, I sat behind the observation glass as they brought Harold in. He looked nervous, his hands shaking. "I just handled communication," he told Quinn. "Roy promised the patent rights once the sale cleared. He said the owner had already agreed." Quinn asked, "Did he mention Mara Ellis?" Crane swallowed. "Only that she wasn't involved. He said she wasn't capable of managing such a deal." I clenched my fists. That was exactly how Roy saw me. Young, inexperienced, easy to push aside. When the interview ended, Quinn turned to me. This is enough to charge him with fraud and attempted theft of intellectual property. My chest felt tight with relief. Then let's finish this. She nodded. One more hearing. Bring everything. This time, I wasn't just defending my rights. I was defending my father's name. The courthouse was packed again. Cameras flashed outside, reporters shouting my name. I ignored them and focused on the folder in my hands, the will, the patent drafts, and the letter linking Roy to Mavinex. When the judge entered, the room went silent. Mr. Dean began calmly. Your Honor, we now have proof that the sale was not only illegal but motivated by a secret business deal involving proprietary technology. He handed the judge the new evidence. Roy's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off. Officer Quinn testified next, confirming the payment trail and Harold Crane's statement. Finally, Roy was called to the stand. He looked pale and furious. You betrayed your brother's trust, Mr. Dean said. Why? Roy glared at me. He wasted years chasing that project. I could have turned it into something real. You would have ruined it. The courtroom gasped. The judge leaned forward. So, you admit the sale was for personal gain? Roy realized too late what he'd said. He looked down, silent. I watched him, my heart aching, but also finally freeing. After the testimony, the judge requested a brief recess. I stepped outside to breathe. Thomas joined me near the courthouse steps. You did great, he said. You stayed calm. I nodded. It's strange. I thought I'd feel angry, but I just feel tired. He smiled softly. That's what justice feels like sometimes. Before we went back in, Officer Quinn approached. The forensic team confirmed something else, she said quietly. Your father's car brakes were tampered with. The world seemed to blur for a moment. Tampered. She nodded grimly. We can't prove who did it yet, but the same company Roy used for his repairs handled the service. Tears filled my eyes, but I held them back. Thank you for telling me. When court resumed, the air felt heavier. I sat down, gripping my folder. The judge returned, face unreadable. After reviewing the evidence, he began. This court rules that the sale of 42 Maple Ridge Lane was unlawful. The property and all associated intellectual materials are hereby restored to Ms. Mara Ellis. Gasps filled the room. Roy dropped his head into his hands. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just sat there, breathing slowly as the judge's words sank in. Thomas squeezed my shoulder. It's over. But I shook my head. Not yet. Roy was being led out by officers, still protesting. You'll regret this, Mara, he shouted. You don't understand what he left behind. The judge banged his gavel. Remove him. Outside the courthouse, cameras surrounded me. I told them only one thing. My father's legacy belongs to his family, and his truth will never be sold. Later that evening, I stood at the edge of the property as the sun set behind the trees. The old workshop looked peaceful again. Thomas joined me, holding a small envelope. The court sent this. Your father's patent is now registered in your name. I smiled faintly. Then it's finally safe. We walked back toward the porch. I glanced once more at the land my father had loved. Somewhere deep inside, I felt him there, proud, quiet, and free. But as the wind rustled the leaves, I noticed something odd. The ground behind the workshop had been disturbed again. Something else was still buried. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still hidden behind the workshop. The soil near the back looked freshly disturbed, even though no one had worked there since the hearing. I grabbed a shovel and started to dig. Thomas showed up a few minutes later. Couldn't wait, huh? He asked with a smile. Something doesn't feel finished, I said. After a few minutes of digging, the shovel hit something solid. Another small metal case. Inside was a sealed folder marked private, for Mara only. My heart raced as I opened it. There were pages of my father's handwriting, more personal this time. The first line read, If you're reading this, it means you found the truth, and I'm proud of you. Tears blurred my vision as I read his next words. Project Ember isn't just a design. It's the key to clean, endless power for small homes. But it's dangerous in the wrong hands. Protect it. He ended with something that made me pause. If anything happens to me, look at the old watch I left on my desk. The code is inside. I looked up at Thomas. There's still more. That night, I searched my father's desk for the old watch. It was heavy and scratched, but when I opened the back, there was a small folded note inside. It read, "Safety Deposit Box Number 14, Crescent Bank." The next morning, I went there with Thomas and Officer Quinn. The clerk checked the records, nodded, and led us to the vault room. My hands trembled as I unlocked the box. Inside were microchips, blueprints, and a flash drive labeled Ember Final Model. Officer Quinn whistled softly. "This is it, the completed version." Thomas said, "Your father must have hidden the final formula before Roy could find it." I held the flash drive carefully. He trusted me with this. Quinn smiled. "Now you can decide how to share it, with honesty this time." We sealed the items for safekeeping, and I signed them into evidence storage until the case fully closed. As we left the bank, I looked up at the clear morning sky. For the first time, the weight on my chest felt lighter. Dad's secret was safe again, right where it belonged. A few weeks later, the case finally ended. Roy pleaded guilty to fraud and forgery after seeing all the evidence stacked against him. He avoided prison time by agreeing to return every cent he had taken, but he would never handle estate work again. I thought I'd feel joy, but mostly I felt peace. The noise around the story faded, and people stopped calling. Thomas came by often to help restore the workshop. Together, we repaired the roof, cleaned the tools, and hung my father's blueprints back on the wall. One afternoon, as sunlight poured through the dusty windows, Thomas looked at me and said, "What will you do with the design?" I smiled. "Finish it, but not to sell it. To make sure Dad's dream becomes real." He nodded approvingly. That's exactly what he would have wanted. When he left, I stood alone, listening to the quiet hum of the place. For the first time in a long while, it didn't feel empty. It felt alive, like my father's spirit had never really left. Months passed, and my life slowly found rhythm again. The house was mine legally now, and I'd started working with a small local lab to complete Dad's energy model. One evening, I received a letter from the city council. They wanted to partner with me to develop affordable, eco-friendly homes using the Ember technology. I read it twice, smiling through tears. My father's dream, the one he'd sacrificed everything for, was finally coming to life. At the property, I placed a new sign by the gate. Maple Ridge Energy Foundation, in memory of Arthur Ellis. Thomas joined me for the small dedication ceremony. Even Officer Quinn stopped by. As we stood under the oak tree, I whispered, "We did it, Dad." The wind rustled softly, and for a moment, I could almost hear his voice again. "I knew you'd protect it, Mara." That night, I looked up at the stars and thought about how far we'd come, from betrayal to truth, from fear to legacy. And somehow it all felt worth it. A year later, the foundation's first model home was finished. Reporters visited again, but this time for something good. Standing in front of the completed building, I told them, "This isn't just my father's invention. It's a reminder that honesty always outlives greed." When the cameras left, I walked alone through the quiet workshop. The smell of sawdust and metal was still there. My father's old tools hung in their same spots. I picked up the watch he'd left me and smiled. "We made it," I whispered. As I stepped outside, Thomas was waiting by the car. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. Ready for what's next. We drove past the hill where everything began, the land that almost slipped away, now full of life again. I realized then that justice wasn't just about courtrooms or papers. It was about keeping promises even when it hurts. And though my father was gone, his legacy burned brighter than ever. The story that began with loss ended with light.